now let's talk about DeSantis's record on the pandemic, because most of the good stuff from DeSantis didn't come until late 2021. Some of it only happened late into the pandemic. So first of all, DeSantis issued locked the whole state down for a month. Was one of the again, many states did not issue complete stay-at-home orders. DeSantis did. When Trump was saying we can't have the cure be worse than disease,
which Trump I was wrong. Saying, that was 4 weeks earlier. I'm sorry.
4 weeks earlier. Yeah. He's saying that by the end of March. And then in April, he's saying we got to open up. Guess on April 23rd, when he said that, Florida was still locked down by Governor DeSantis. So that's part one. Part two is when DeSantis would keep a partial lockdown in place until September. He shut down all the schools until August. So this idea that he was leading the way against the lockdowns is a complete lie. It's a total fabrication. DeSantis was imitating Trump to the nth degree, and usually more pro-lockdown than Trump was throughout this time period. And Trump was always one step ahead of DeSantis at pulling back on these things than DeSantis was. But I mean, you have the news headline. He was threatening bars and other places with fines and penalties for not social distancing in the summer of 2020. The idea that, you reversed course. People got confused about this because the media highlighted when DeSantis was not as extreme as Cuomo. And so people think Florida was this free state all the way through. No, it wasn't. Those of us that know about how the law was working through that time period know that, in fact, Texas was generally more free than Florida through most of the pandemic. Tennessee was more free than Florida through most of the pandemic. Alabama was more free than Florida throughout most of the pandemic. Iowa was more free than Florida throughout most of the pandemic. South Dakota was more free than Florida through. I could go on and on and on.
This is late June, dude. This is late June.
And read the headline so that people can hear it.
It says DeSantis cracking down on Florida businesses not practicing social distancing, says median age of new COVID-19 cases is trending in younger direction. And by the way, it didn't. All right. It really didn't. Now, overall that we looked at it, now that we have a longer span of data, the beta, delta, and other variants that came out, they really didn't trend younger. Not as far as fatalities anyway, and like serious sickness. It said that he held a press conference on Saturday that announcing that he is cracking down on Florida businesses that are packed and not social distancing. In particular, these businesses mostly involve bars and restaurants. The Department of Business and Professional Regulations are going to be enforcing capacity limits. The Surgeon General is also reissuing a public health advisory. The guidance touches on 5 key points in particular: elderly and vulnerable individuals, which, by the way, he will later use for the vaccine push; practicing social distancing, wearing a mask in public settings, staying home when sick, frequent hand washing and sanitization. I mean, nothing different here than
June 20th.
I was just going to say, Robert, 20th. This is 14 days to slow the spread, and by June 21st.
Exactly. So he locks down in April, keeps a partial lockdown all the way until September. And even in June, he's threatening people and threatening businesses with fines if they don't do social distancing and masking. The guy is himself often running around with a mask outside when he meets Trump once on the tarmac in the summer. Trump doesn't have a mask. Nobody around Trump does, but DeSantis does. So this illusion that he was leading the curve and he would have fired Fauci immediately and he never would have done a lockdown are lies based on DeSantis' own record in Florida.
Here's a quote of him. I'm just going to read it. We recommend follow CDC guidelines the whole time. I've not preempted locals from doing what they think is right. At the same time, you have to enforce that and you have to make a decision about what penalty is appropriate. And again, this was a key media talking point. If you don't remember, folks, this was a media talking point that now it's shifting from younger people to younger people. And yes, younger people are getting infected by these less dangerous, more infectious variants of COVID-19 because they were mutating, right, to be more infectious but less dangerous. And it was infecting younger people, but it wasn't resulting in increased, mortality rates among young people. In fact, it was getting less because it was actually less dangerous. And if so, it was reactionary. I mean, that is just the truth, ladies and gentlemen. I hate to say it. Fast forward 6 months. One thing I will say, Trump's one of his biggest weaknesses is on the vaccine. Pushing the vaccine the way he did because he wanted, and that's ego driven. He wanted it to be, he wanted credit.
Well, he thought it was the exit plan. Everybody was telling him, if you don't want to lock down, if you don't want any of these things to happen, and you don't want to be blamed for millions of deaths, you have to do a vaccine. And you're the only person who's bold enough, strong enough to get Operation Warp Speed and to get it through. So his ego was pitched. But even on the vaccine issue, once again, the mythology of DeSantis is more myth than real. I give him credit for coming around on the vaccine issue, but initially he was worse than Trump on the vaccine.
Robert, the very first person, and I know that Trump quote tweeted this on True Social just last week, but the truth is they've had this in the barrel for a long time. I was actually talking with Laura and others about this weeks ago, months ago now, because when this whole narrative started, and Laura and I were remembering watching Fox and Friends. This is after Trump has been defeated. Now, COVID was appropriately, or effectively used to remove him from the White House. And we're watching DeSantis on Fox and Friends. The very first day Pfizer's vaccine is available, he's happy. You know what? Eat and grin, ear to ear. We're going to give it to the elderly, the vulnerable first. This guy's 100 years old. He's a World War II veteran. He's healthy as a horse, still kicking. And I'm like, Laura, wouldn't it be horrible? And Laura was like, what, if he just like croaks right now, or worse, even just a couple weeks from now? That happened. So Fox failed to run that story. But the very first guy who got jabbed, which
and again, DeSantis has this huge press conference. He's bringing him out, pays a bunch of taxpayer dollars.
They're both guilty of that, my friend. Both
to get the vaccine, promotes the heck out of it, tells pharmacies and other people if they don't use it on people that they're going to have funding and other issues face them, and threatens them basically with it. And as what Richard's talking about is in a big high profile, brings an old veteran out, says, here, you should get the vaccine. Here's why you should get the vaccine. Injects the guy, gets the vaccine. He dies soon afterwards. DeSantis doesn't say boo about it. The Fox doesn't talk about it at all. And I think we have a thing, 6 months, 9 months, however long, for a long time into the vaccine, DeSantis was one that was promoted it more than Trump ever did. So I saw people in the chat, oh, DeSantis never promoted the vaccine. You weren't paying attention. DeSantis promoted the hell out of the vaccine.
Oh, my God. I got a Fox News article right here. Are you ready? I mean, this is just simply untrue. They both, because for Trump, for reasons that, we certainly understood at the time, we just thought he was wrong. But, I mean, Trump's out of office at this point. He's gone.
Really?
And, yeah, I mean, look, pretty doggone close to 100. If fully vaccinated Floridians' chances of surviving COVID is pretty doggone close to 100% if you get vaccinated. I mean, folks.
And look at when that is.
July 22nd, 2021.
So, midway through the whole vaccine launch, he's telling people he's promoting and advocating the heck out of it. He's saying this will solve your Trump statements are much weaker in promoting the vaccine than DeSantis. And as you point out, Trump is no longer president, so he no longer has any political power. This is while he is Governor DeSantis is holding press conferences saying how wonderful this vaccine is.
Later, almost a full year after the election later, Robert, look at this comment. If you're vaccinated and you test positive, but you don't get sick, well, the name of the game is to keep you people out of the hospital. Well, that sounds like Anthony Fauci verbatim. 75.
Yes,
when we were people like us were coming back and saying, guess what? It doesn't prevent, right?
Yep.
75% of Floridians over the age of 50 have gotten shots. So we think that's really, really positive. If you are vaccinated,
that's DeSantis taking credit for how many people he got stuck with the needle.
If you are vaccinated, fully vaccinated, the chance of you getting seriously ill or dying from COVID is effectively zero. If you look at the people that are being admitted to hospitals, over 95% of them are either not fully vaccinated or not vaccinated at all. And so these vaccines are saving lives. They're reducing mortality. That's Joe Biden. Verbatim.
Yeah, and as one of the chat points out, not only was he shutting down schools, shutting down businesses, shutting down restaurants, shutting down places.
Pfizer filthy rich.
Completely, yeah, he did. But he promoted the heck out of the vaccine for the better part of a year, made sure as many people in Florida got it as possible. But as people point out, he was shutting down nursing homes. He bragged about how he was shutting down visitation to nursing homes with older people who couldn't be connected to their family. He did all of this. And let's go to the last part. He says he would have fired Fauci. Well, he has his own Florida Surgeon General out there. Steve Deese has bought into the big lie that he says Fauci, how we know that DeSantis would have fired Fauci is DeSantis fired his own Florida Surgeon General and replaced him with somebody else. Complete lie. Now, I don't think Deese knows it's a lie. Yep. I think he's repeating a lie he's been led to believe, a mythology he's been preached at, but it's completely false. The Florida Surgeon General, and we can pull up the Wikipedia link on the guy. So this was Scott Rivkees. He was a huge Fauci fan. This is a guy, again, Florida's version of Anthony Fauci. How did he get his job? Ron DeSantis gave it to him. Ron DeSantis appointed him. That's who gave him the job, number one. Number two, did Ron DeSantis fire him? No, just the opposite. Late into the pandemic response, over a year late, Rivke's contract, which was a special deal because he had an interchange relationship with the university, ran out. What did DeSantis do? Did he fire Florida's Fauci? No, he extended him another 3 months. It was only when he could no longer legally work that finally DeSantis got a different Surgeon General. But even when on his exit, he promoted him and talked about how great he was. So not only would DeSantis not have fired Fauci, DeSantis would have given Fauci a promotion. Because how do we know that? Because that's what he did with Florida's own Fauci.
Dude, he made sure the guy got recognized by the state Senate for his duty to keeping kids safe. So here he is, pivotal in keeping the schools closed down, and then he put him in charge of reopening them, which was in fact a total and complete joke. And then later that led to the fight, which is where DeSantis began to be what he is portraying himself to be. Alachua and Broward would, when the schools reopened, well, not immediately after they reopened, later, everyone wanted to do away with the masks. And then Alachua and Broward, by this time, this guy's long gone. Fauci, the Florida Fauci is out.
It's late 2021, early 2022 that is DeSantis starts rewriting his COVID script. To his credit, that's when even here there's limits.
He left in September of 2021, right before the new year. This is when schools began to reopen.
And he gets his new Surgeon General in the it's actually confirmed by the Senate in February of 2022. That new Surgeon General is really good. That new Surgeon General is the one that starts second-guessing the vaccines, that leads DeSantis to start second-guessing the vaccines. And then it's when DeSantis is saying no mask mandates in schools. Then it's when DeSantis... Now, even here, the laws are limited. Did they pass a law banning vaccine passports? Actually, no. They passed a law banning documentation for vaccine passports, but you're legally still allowed in Florida to require them as a condition of access. You just can't request the written proof. So if you're willing to lie, you can get service. That's not exactly a great vaccine passport bill. Vaccine mandates, he allows doctors and hospitals and people in medical settings to do it explicitly. The state of Florida has the ability for the Surgeon General to force vaccines on people anytime they want. And despite many requests, DeSantis refuses to reverse that law. The actual vaccine mandate allows vaccine mandates as long as you allow for testing and masking as an alternative. Otherwise, it's just federal law. He has one nice addition about COVID immunity, but that's about it. So he has one of the weaker vaccine mandate laws that are passed. And last but not least, the final proof that DeSantis is not what he pretends to be on the issues of the pandemic, in the sense of the guy that would have fired Fauci had he been president in 2020 instead of Trump, which is his claim to fame now, is the fact, why has he passed a law and he's about to reaffirm it? He passed it in 2021, extended it in 2022, is talking about extending it in 2023, that says everybody who followed Fauci's advice cannot be sued even if they killed your loved one, even if they killed him by negligence and recklessness. That he has passed the broadest of the one place you can't sue about remdesivir. By the way, Fauci was DeSantis, big promoter of remdesivir, not a big promoter of hydroxychloroquine, like Trump throughout the whole pandemic got massive criticism because he kept promoting alternative treatments, hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, anything that could work, solar therapy treatment, you name it. He got all this criticism for it when he was obsessed with trying to find solutions. DeSantis often wasn't doing that. And he gave complete immunity to everybody in Florida. If you remdesivir, you you can't sue in Florida thanks to DeSantis, who gave immunity to the hospitals, immunities to the doctors, that as long as they followed Fauci, they were immune from suit. So would DeSantis have fired Fauci? No, he's lying about it. He would have likely promoted him and extended him just like he did his own version.
I think too, there's, because that's clearly his strongest, whether it's real or not, that was his strongest bet.
It's mostly myth. I mean, people like Steve Deese really think he fired the Florida Surgeon General in the middle of the pandemic. Completely false. Completely false. And Steve Deese is, he wrote The Fourth Reich. He's very well informed on this topic, just not about DeSantis. DeSantis mostly rewrote his history in late 2021, early 2022, when Trump was no longer president, and he rewrote it conveniently to fit the script for a 2024 campaign. That outside of him being publicly critical of the vaccine beginning in 2022 and saying there's a grand jury there, he's done nothing of substance different than almost any other lockdown governor did.
He would have been better off just being like, you know what, I did what the president did, and I listened to the advice of experts until it became very apparent that they were not following the science. So then enough was enough. I mean, that would have been a much more persuasive argument.
Down deep, like Trump was desperate to reopen the economy and stop massive
he knew
death.
His Achilles heel.
Whereas DeSantis, his goal, he reacts like a politician. Like, why were Cuba and China so terrible during the pandemic in particular? It's because it appeals to the ego of a statist. The ego of a statist and a politician is that only I can solve your problems. And look at how great it is. Like in Cuba, they're still bragging about, look at how we stopped COVID in Cuba. No, what you did is stop your economy and trigger a revolution. So, good luck with how that works out for you in the post-Castro commie era in Cuba. But DeSantis showed the same signs, the sins of a politician. Not only is he like uber pragmatic sometimes to his detriment, but he was desperate to prove to people how he was solving the problems and how he was leading the curve. And I mean, he was bragging about flattening the curve all the way into the summer. Which was, always nonsense. There was lockdowns. It played to his ego. Trump never said, look at how great it is that we locked things down. He said this is a terrible thing and the cure can't be worse than disease. Whereas DeSantis is bragging about it several months into it. Why? Because he's a politician. He wants to prove to you that as a politician, he can solve your problems. And the problem with that is that proves to me that DeSantis would have been worse as president in 2020 than Trump was had he been there. And that ultimately it's not a reason to support his candidacy in 2024. It's a reason to be skeptical of his candidacy in 2024 because he has all the sins of a politician, of which flip-flopping on Ukraine is just one example.